isn't necessarily good, but let's talk about our cases that go to the Supreme Court. And where did we leave off yesterday? What's like the rule of four? Okay, we were talking about not many cases will get granted writ of certiorari, having their cases heard in front of the court. You have to use the rule of four, meaning 4 justices have to agree to hear your case. They don't have to agree about which side they think has the better argument. As long as 4 judges think that the entire court should hear this case, then they're going to hear it. Okay? Now, if 4 justices agree to hear your case and you're granted a writ of certiorari, right, they're going to schedule you for oral arguments. They'll schedule your case. Now, for example, the cases that are getting argued next week, those cases have been on the schedule for months. Now, the schedule itself, okay, those before those cases are ever going to get argued, attorneys have to send in what's called a legal brief. Okay? Legal brief is just a summary of your argument, and the court wants that ahead of time. So your attorneys, long before you ever actually present your case, your attorneys will send in a legal brief. Ironically, it's called a brief, but it's usually 30 to 40 pages in length. So if you're going to be a lawyer, I hope you like writing. The weird thing is, though, they use this weird standard and the margins are really wide. So like 30 pages there is more like 10 to 15. I know, trust me. You see it and you're like, this is not 30 pages.
Wait, can you look bad? I feel like it would look bad.
Well, they leave it that way because I think people want to be able to make notations in the margins, and that allows for it.
Can you repeat like the brief statement?
Yes, legal brief is simply a summary of your argument, okay? That you want to send that in because justices want to prepare questions and start researching your case. Now, the 2 sides send in legal briefs, but remember, cases can also have what are called amicus curiae briefs. Those are third-party briefs. Other groups might want to see an outcome in your case sway one way. Like, for example, let's pretend that Landon over there and Fry have a disagreement, okay? And I have to settle that disagreement as a judge, right? And Paul over there says, I'm being misunderstood. And you know what? Deal over here says, I'd like to submit a letter on behalf of Paul. I know I'm not the one in the controversy, but here's why I think you should rule in favor of Landon, right? And over here, somebody says, hey, you know what? I think Fry's right. I will submit an amicus curiae brief to Scalise, saying here's why you should decide in favor of Fry. Same thing with the Supreme Court. Like, for example, when the case about same-sex marriage, Obergefell versus Hodges, when that case was decided in 2015, you had all kinds of third-party groups sending legal briefs to the Supreme Court, saying here's why we think you should decide this case. Like you had the National Organization for Marriage, which supported traditional marriage. But then you also had like liberal groups supporting same-sex marriage. So you had all these third parties issuing briefs, and the justices will pay attention to these because sometimes they bring up issues that other people don't think of. All right? So you submit your legal briefs, you're on the schedule, and when the day comes for your case to be heard, right? You're standing in front of the Supreme Court, and this is where things get crazy. Remember, it's very culty, this whole thing, okay? This is the Supreme Court chamber on the inside. They got these big old ionic columns. It's a huge vaulted ceiling. You got these giant red curtains. The judges are all sitting up here in their high-back leather chairs, and they're all wearing black robes.
That's intimidating.
Oh, it is, and it's meant to be. They're up here. Your attorney, you're down here. Okay? And look, level matters. They even teach you this in education classes that when you want your students to be paying attention to you, one of the reasons you're sitting down is that when I want you to pay attention specifically to what I'm saying, I'm standing up. I'm up here, you're down there. Aha! Right? See, we're just messing with your heads and you don't even know it. Same thing here. We're up here, we're important, you're down there, you're not. Okay? So your attorney stands at this little lectern, and he gets a very limited amount of time to argue his case. Each side gets 30 minutes. That's it. You guys are anybody taking the communications class right now? Yeah. Kaylee, how long do you have your speeches have to be?
We have 1 to 5 minutes too.
Oh, 1 to 5 minutes. Ooh. What happens if you go over?
You mean you get like points taken off?
You get penalized, right? Here they have little lights on, like a red light, a yellow light, and a green light. And the green light's on, you're good to talk. Yellow light means you're at a 2-minute warning, and red light means you shut up.
Isn't that what they do, like presidential debates and stuff?
Yes, they do. They do that.
What
Now,
do they do if you keep talking in the red?
they cut you off and they say stop talking, and they have a bailiff that can escort you from the podium if need be. All right,
That's
now
gonna be on my bucket list.
to be kicked out of the Supreme Court. Wow. All right, up here at the lectern at the podium, when you're giving your argument, here's the bizarre thing that happens. I had a professor who had some experience with the Supreme Court and being in front of the Supreme Court. He said you get 30 minutes to argue your case, but you need to be able to summarize your whole case in 15 minutes. And he said the reason for that is the judges are constantly asking you questions and interrupting you. Right? They're constantly asking you questions and interrupting you. Because they want to know, if we rule in your favor, how will this apply? What situation will result as from this? Are you saying this? Clarify your position. And sometimes they zing them a little bit too. It's kind of like how I treat you all in journal questions.
You just make me mad.
I know. And the justices will do that too. Some justices, like here in the middle, that's where the Chief Justice sits. Some justices ask a lot of questions. They're very chatty, very inquisitive.
But doesn't that take up like your 30 minutes?
Yeah, but remember, Charlie, there's a saying for that. Tough shitski. Okay? They don't care. They don't care. You got 30 minutes, and that's why you need to be able to sum up your whole argument in 15 minutes. Because you know you're going to get interrupted. Right? So the Chief Justice right now, John Roberts, he asks a decent amount of questions. When Ruth Bader Ginsburg was on the court and around, she asked a lot of questions. Some people, though, like Clarence Thomas, who now I think is the oldest justice on the court, he doesn't ask questions very often. In fact, there was a 15-year gap in between him talking.
Oh my God.
He didn't ask any questions. And then the funny thing was, when he broke his silence, it was to make a joke. And people were like, what just happened? Let's answer the phone. Hello? Yes. Yes. Okay. Send her down there in the main office, huh? All right. Pedro, they want you down in the main office. Why? I don't know.
That's gonna go on your recording.
Yeah, I know. It's really great. They're like, hey, they want you in the main office. Okay? Now, you're up here, excuse me, the justices are up here, and Clarence Thomas, like I said, he doesn't say a lot. And he makes a joke and breaks his silence. He's like, oh, that's what you break your silence for. But some justices just like to soak it all in. And there's like an attitude of this too. See, they can interrupt you, but what as a lawyer, what can you not do to them? Interrupt them, because they will glare at you like you wouldn't believe. They give you like a Trina Wise death stare. And you know those teachers, the ones that can just look at you and make you feel like this tall and like an idiot. And, ooh, man, ridiculous. Okay? So you got 30 minutes to give your particulars out of the case and your attorney. And by the way, you can sit in here in the gallery if you're a member of the public. All right? If you're a member of the general public, you can go in and listen in the gallery. Okay?
Sarah Cooper needs to be sent to the main office.
All right? Now, once the justices hear the case, okay? Once they hear the case, each attorney's had their 30 minutes. At the end of the week, the justices get together to do conferencing. Okay? This is their conference room. Conferencing is where they're going to discuss the cases. Now, this is great. This is where it even gets cultier. Okay? The conference room, it's just the justices there. There's no secretaries. There's no notes.
It's just what?
It's just the judges, the 9 justices. Nobody's taking any notes. Nobody else is in there. The room, it's unadorned except for the portrait of John Marshall. Okay? Even the seating, even the seating is done in order. The chief sits here. The most senior justice sits opposite of him. Then the 3 oldest ones, they get a little extra room. And then you cram in the 4 newest ones right there.
Are those like real books on the bookshelf?
They are. No, it's pretty bizarre.
Do we need to?
No, but this is just a little to give you a little bit of the strangeness of it. Now, the seating has an arrangement. Before they ever even sit down, they have what's called the handshake tradition. When they come in, every justice shakes hands with every other justice in the room because they want to, they're like, hey, we're about to argue over some cases. And we want to remember that we're still colleagues and still friends. And they maintain this personal, very close relationship. Question?
Why is there so many things with John Marshall on this?
Because he's the greatest justice of all time.
Like, actually?
Yes.
Okay.
If this were the NBA, John Marshall would be Michael Jordan. Okay? So ultimately, they have this handshake tradition, and they're like, hey, we want to see each other as people. It's important to argue over cases, but remember, we're still friends and coworkers.
Do they handshake after?
No.
Oh, so like you can like wave on like that.
Yeah, you can. Like we were shaking hands first, all right? While everybody's still
Has
friends.
this
Right.
always happened?
It's happened since I think the 1920s. I'm trying to think of the name of the justice who started the handshake tradition.
Do they kind of like do it like in order, or you just like randomly like?
Randomly, as long as you get everybody. Okay? So you got the handshake tradition. They sit down, and here's what's even, look, they even haze. Okay? There's hazing that goes on. Whoever the newest justice is, like right now it's Amy Coney Barrett, she's the keeper of the door. Meaning if somebody knocks on the door, she has to get up and answer it. Be like, hey, new guy, you gotta answer the door.
I hate that.
You would.
Yeah, especially like if you're like in the middle of an argument and it's like crap, gotta go get the door.
Exactly. All right. Now, they've got this ornate seating. It's this wood-paneled, beautiful room, and when they're conferencing about the cases, every judge, every justice will get a chance to speak about the case. But who gets to speak first? The Chief Justice speaks first. Okay? Everybody will get a chance to speak on it, but the Chief speaks first. And who speaks last?
The new guy.
New guy. By the time it gets to the new guy, what's already been said?
Everything.
Everything worth saying. It's kind of like you ever been in a class before, and you were going to say something really smart, and the person with their hand up, teacher recognizes them, and they say it, and then they're like, oh, what were you going to say? And you're like, same. You're like, okay, whatever. All right. Now, everybody gets a chance to talk about the case and give their thoughts on the case. And after everybody's had a chance to talk about the case, then they're going to vote on the case.
Wait, like can you interrupt people though?
You can ask questions, yeah. But typically it's like, this is their time to talk.
Do you have to raise your hand?
I don't think there's a hand-raising tradition. Okay? Once everybody's had a chance to talk, then they're going to vote. Who gets to vote first? No.
New guy.
New guy votes first, and then they go in ascending order. Because that way, if it's 4-4, who gets to cast a tiebreaker? The chief does. It's all about the chief.
So the new guy gets to be like the first one to like kind of mess up.
Yeah.
It's like okay, like you.
Like imagine you're like, I vote for party A, and everybody else votes for party B, and you're like, ooh. Yeah.
What are the wooden things on the table?
Wooden things on the table, it's a great question. If I had to guess, it's probably a place to prop up your notes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there was no notes.
Why don't they like anonymously vote so like one person's decision isn't like based off someone else's?
Great question. They don't do anonymous votes. I suppose they could if they wanted to, but this way it's like you verify that. Right? And also too, part of that is it goes along with the public. It's public record how every justice voted on every single case. Okay? That way you know who to scrutinize in the future. Right?
How is it public record if there's no secretaries in the room? You just trust them to be honest?
They they're going to announce their vote, their decision
Oh.
later on. Like when they announce their ruling in a case, and the Chief Justice will say by an 8-1 margin, and they'll be like, "Wait a second, I didn't vote with the 8," you know, and they're like, "I didn't either." So yeah,
Can you change your vote?
typically you can, but typically when they take that initial vote, unless some dramatic change happens, you stick with your vote, right? But that doesn't mean there's probably some changing that hasn't gone on. Okay, so largely you just make that decision when you're doing conferencing. Now, once they've made a decision, okay, then the Supreme Court, they do something that I really appreciate. They write an official opinion of the court. The opinion of the court is written explanation about why they did what they did. They give an official written explanation about why they decided the case the way they did. No other branch of government does that. Every decision they make, there's an official opinion explaining why they did what they did. Question.
Who writes that?
I'm going to tell you in just a second because it's different every time. The official opinion of the court explains why the court did what they did.
Why though? Like,
Alright.
why does that have to be like a public record?
This is a public record because they want to provide a model of consistency. Like, let's say we had an issue that was free speech. I'll give you an example, second on one use today. Dress code, okay? You want to be able to show off your shoulders, don't you, Charlie? All right,
You're
but
right.
can you show off your shoulders here at the castle? All right. What if somebody wanted to challenge that and said the government's violating my freedom of expression? Okay. The courts want to make that decision known so that other schools in the future, know how to make their dress code without violating the Constitution.
Why can't we show
it
our
already
shoulders?
a violation?
What is it?
How is that already a violation?
Great question. Here's the thing. One of the things about the court, if you want to take an issue to the court system and say, I think my rights are being violated, you're free to do that. But if you never take it to them, what's going to happen? Nothing. All right. The court doesn't go out looking for controversies. You have to bring the controversy to them. Think about this. Let's make it something way more obvious. What if the school administration put in the student handbook, you cannot criticize any administrator, especially female administrators?
I would do it just as like that.
See, now, would that be something that violates your freedom of speech? But if you never took it to the courts, nothing would happen, and you would just have to live with it. All right, the court doesn't go looking for controversies. You got to bring it to them.
So we can take the dress code to the Supreme Court, that's what you're telling me?
Yes. If you can try. Okay? Now, if you wanted to do that, like let's say you want to challenge the dress code and say, you know what, this is counterproductive towards females, it violates their freedom of expression, and you could list a whole slew of different things in terms of that. The school would have to demonstrate somehow that girls' shoulders distract boys. Right? I don't know of any sociological studies that have been on that, but maybe somebody should work on that, just so you can say, hey, definitively, the shoulders are not doing it for the boys. Okay?
I truly don't get that though.
That's a discussion for another day, but I don't get it either. Oh well. All right? So when they decide to write the official opinion of the court, okay, it's written usually by somebody different every time, and here's how they assign it. If the chief is with the majority, if the Chief Justice is in the majority, he will decide who writes the official opinion. If the chief's in the majority, he'll decide who writes the official opinion.
If the chief is in the majority?
Yes. Like let's say it's a...
If he's not though.
We'll get to it in a second. Okay? If he's in the majority, the chief will decide who writes who writes the opinion of the court. Now, do you think the Chief Justice or other justices want to write the official opinion of the court?
No.
Yes, they do. You all see writing as a punishment, as work. But why would a justice want to write the
So
opinion?
then he knows like exactly what's going to be said.
Yes, why do you want to make sure you're the one who's saying what needs to be said?
Because like even though like you're gonna look over it anyway, but people can like switch up your words a little bit or change the script, and you don't want like false information getting out there.
Remember, this is an interpretation of how the law and the Constitution are going to be seen. It's a powerful thing to be able to say, I wrote the official explanation about how the Constitution will be interpreted. Imagine, Kaiser, if you could be the one who writes the opinion on free speech and dress codes and allowing girls to show their shoulders. Wouldn't you rather do it than some man?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay? You're the one who is etching history into ink and paper. You get to decide how the Constitution is going to be interpreted. Now, some Chief Justices, they've been really greedy with their opinions. Like John Marshall, he wrote most of the opinions. And when he was Chief Justice, he's like, look, I'm smarter than you people. I know it. You know it. I'm going to do most of the writing. Okay?
Can the chief, instead of like having someone write it, can he write it? Can he choose to write it himself?
Mm-hmm. And John Marshall did that regularly. Now, John Roberts, the current Chief Justice, he has a more democratic process. He tries to make sure that everybody on the court gets to write at least one official opinion before anybody gets a second one.
That would take so long.
That is so stupid too.
That's not stupid.
Like, that's
Because what
not
you're
like
doing,
the
like, think of it this way, though. Like, if I'm the Chief Justice and, you guys are my associate justices, and I'm like, all right, so Tamna, you were the majority last time, and you wrote the last opinion, and I want to get Losh in on this one, and you also choose people who have certain expertise. Like, for example, if Kaiser was somebody who had expertise in educational law, then yes, I would want her to write that opinion. Or if Aowen has a business law background, and this is a business-related case, then I want her to write it because she'll write it better than other people would. Does that make sense?
But doesn't that take like so much longer than if one person were to write it?
No. Okay? You let other people write it also because you want to build up a sense of goodwill on the court. Right? Because think of it this way. What if I'm the Chief Justice and I don't let you guys ever write the official explanations? How do you feel?
I get mad things to you.
Annoyed. You're like, Scalia's hogging everything for himself. Right? I am on the Supreme Court because I'm an intelligent, educated person with lots of legal experience. I should help write how this Constitution and the law will be interpreted.
Yeah, but as the chief, if he wants to write every single one, he has the right to do that.
All right.
He
Except
has the power to do that.
now, also in assigning opinions, if the chief is in the minority, sometimes the chief's in the minority. If the chief's in the minority, whoever the most senior justice is, whoever's been there the longest, they assign the opinion. Seniority matters.
What if the, like, oldest justice is in the minority as well?
Then whoever's the next most senior.
Can you say it again?
Sure, they go by seniority. If the chief's not in the majority, whoever the senior most person in the majority, they get to assign the opinion. Ooh.
Does that happen often with the chiefs in the minority?
Well, it depends on the issue, okay? And it can happen. And here's something you have to realize about the Supreme Court, too. A lot of people think they're 5-4 decisions all the time, but they're not. A lot of times, they're a huge chunk of them are either 9-0 or 8-1 decisions. A lot of times, they see things very similarly because they're like, according to the law, this, and this, then it's pretty obvious. So you're going to find that they agree. I'd say you get more 9-0, 8-1, and 7-2 decisions than anything else.
Well, they probably just don't like put their opinions in it. They just do like whatever like the law says. You know what I mean?
Well, there's some discrepancy on that, and we'll get to that in a minute, okay? Now, if you're in the minority on a case, like let's say it's a 6-3 vote and you're one of the three, you have the option of writing what's called a dissenting opinion, okay? If you dissent, that means you disagree, okay? You can write your own opinion, and this is explaining why you disagree with the majority. I will write a dissenting opinion. Here's why I disagree with the majority.
Well, why is that? That's not a changing thing.
All right, Tatum asked you a question. She's like, why would you do that? It's like, it's not like it's going to change anything. You're lost. All right? Dissenting opinions are almost always for the future, for posterity. Okay? Because you're hoping that somebody down the road will see your argument, and in a similar case, they'll overturn that case from before, that they'll change their mind. Because you could provide them with a good, solid argument to base theirs on in the future.
Well, it's just like seeing it like two sides to every story.
In a way, you're right. Okay? Let me give you an example. 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson, the Supreme Court ruled that you could separate people by race as long as you provided equal facilities. Right? It was an 8-1 decision, and the one person who dissented was John Marshall Harlan, the great dissenter. That was his nickname. I didn't make that up. Right? And he wrote that the Constitution should always be colorblind, and that equal protection under the law shouldn't regard, like there's no, like if you separate people by race, you are implying that they are inherently unequal. And 50 years later in Brown versus Board of Education, people utilized that dissenting opinion to help formulate their argument then. They're like, look, the court has secretly always known this even in the 1800s. So when you write a dissenting opinion, you're writing for posterity. You're hoping down the line, somebody will look at this and you will help them create a foundation for their argument. One other type of opinion you can write are what are called concurring opinions. Okay, concurring opinions. This is when you agree with you agree with the majority. You agree with the majority, but for different legal reasons. Here's an example, a more low-key example. Let's say Landon and I go to a Marshall football game. Bros, Saturdays are for the boys. Okay? And Landon and I go watch a Marshall game, and Marshall wins. Okay? Go Herd. And as Landon and I are talking about it, we agree that Marshall won the game, but Landon says they won it because they played great offense. And I'm like, no, Landon. They won it because they played great defense. We agree on the result, but we have different reasons about why that result came about. That's the same issue there. That's when you write a concurring opinion. We're going to vote for Party A. I vote with the majority, but for different legal reasons.
What is the benefit of writing?
You add to the case, and it's kind of like almost like a dissenting opinion. You let the fact know that you think there's more to this. Like, let's use the teacher in Milton as an example. Okay? That maybe she claims that the school is violating my freedom of religion. And a justice sides with her and says, I agree that we should fine for this teacher, but not because of freedom of religion, but because I think it's a free speech issue. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And you're setting a standard that teachers have both the right to freedom of religion and free speech. Okay? Concurring opinions. You agree with them, but for different legal reasons. All right? When Supreme Court justices make decisions, when they are deciding their cases, they are largely guided by precedent. Precedent is how similar cases have been decided in the past. Precedent deals with how similar cases have been decided in the past. We use precedent. It provides consistency. Okay? There's a Latin term for it called stare decisis. It means let the decision stand. All right? Let me give you an example of how legal precedent works. We'll mention this case later on, but in terms of free speech in schools and your conduct here, kids can still express their rights, but as long as they don't disrupt the educational process. That's the standard. That's the precedent. So if we had a situation, like I said, let's say there's a law that the school makes a policy that says you can't criticize the administration unless, you can't criticize the administration at all. And you guys say, I think that violates my freedom of speech because I should be allowed to criticize the principals. All right? Sometimes they do things worthy of criticism. The Supreme Court would look at this and they'd say, well, how have we decided cases like this in the past? And they're like, well, let's use the standard. Does a kid criticizing the principals, does that disrupt the educational process? No, not really. Because it's like, hey, plenty of schools operate just fine without, and administrators still get criticized. So they would be like, you know what, kids, you're absolutely right. We're applying precedent. How have similar cases been decided in the past? Okay? Precedent's important. It provides consistency. That way, schools in the future know that we can require kids to do X, Y, and Z if there's a legitimate reason behind it. I told you all about the 9/11 thing yesterday, right? Yeah. That, that's an example of conduct gone too far. All right? Ultimately, that's their guiding principle, the way they operate with speech in schools. Okay? Now, every now and again, precedent can be a bad thing. Because I'm going to go with you. Anybody grow up in a Baptist church? I grew up in a Baptist church. And Baptist church, Lost, you'll know this. You got history. When I always would ask something, I'd be like, why do we do this in this particular way? What's the answer the Baptist church always gives you, Losh?
Because that's the way we've always done it.
It's the way we've always done it. Okay? But is the way we've always done it always a good thing? No. Okay? Here's an example. All right? 2015, the case about same-sex marriage. States had always been allowed to deny same-sex couples marriage certificates if they wanted to. And the Supreme Court had backed that up. Why does the Supreme Court reverse themselves and now say, we're going to allow same-sex couples to get married? We think it's a right. How do you know when it's time to get rid of precedent and say, something's changed?
Because of the people of society.
What do you mean? I heard somebody say public and then you said the people. What do you mean the people of society?
Like what they want at the moment. So most people think it's okay. So it's kind of what.
You're on the right track with that. Think about this, 2015, and then go back to, say, 1950s and 60s. What's changed about same-sex marriage or same-sex relationships or our thoughts or our understanding of homosexuality?
It's not more accepted.
What did we learn about 1973? What did the American Psychiatric Association do? Remember this, up until 1973, homosexuality was recognized as a mental disorder. Okay? And they no longer recognized it. Plus, also in regards to this, you had states allowing same-sex marriage, and the Supreme Court said, you know what? Our understanding of this particular issue has changed. All right? They change precedent when society changes, like our understanding of things change, or if they think a clear legal mistake has been made in the past. We'll pick up with that tomorrow. Hang on one second, Tama.